You're in your mid-40s, scrolling through your phone late at night. A payment reminder pops up. Your car insurance is due tomorrow. You open your banking app and feel that familiar knot in your stomach. The numbers look fine on paper, but somehow they never quite add up the way you hoped. You start doing the mental calculations: rent or mortgage, utilities, groceries, your daughter's soccer registration, your son's school trip, the minimum payment on that credit card you promised yourself you'd pay off last year. Despite earning a salary that would have seemed impossible 10 years ago, you're still counting pennies. Here's the truth most financial advice misses. Your 40s aren't about becoming wealthy, they're about becoming free. And freedom and wealth aren't always the same thing. And I've watched countless people navigate this exact crossroads. What fascinates me isn't just the numbers, it's the psychology behind them. The invisible decisions we make that quietly build either peace of mind or perpetual stress. Your 40s present a choice that most of us don't even realize we're making. The direction you take now will determine whether you spend your 60s exploring possibilities or managing problems, whether retirement means adventure or anxiety. If any of this resonates with you, I'd love to have you join this community. Hit subscribe if you want a different perspective on money, one that prioritizes mental clarity over just bigger paychecks. And if something here clicks for you, the like button helps me reach others who might need to hear this too. So why are the 40s so critical? Here's the conventional wisdom. Build wealth by increasing your income. And yes, what you earn absolutely matters. I won't pretend otherwise. But the reality is more nuanced than that. According to recent Federal Reserve surveys, about half of Americans feel like they're living paycheck to paycheck. And here's the surprising part. It's not just lower-income households. Bank of America research shows that even among higher-income households, lifestyle creep is often the main cause of financial stress. You bought a house, you bought a couple of cars, and before you know it, all your money is going to bills. This is the problem with your 40s. You're probably earning more than you ever have, but you're also spending more than you ever have. And the gap between those two numbers, that's what actually decides your future. Let me paint two pictures for you. Path A looks successful on paper. High income, nice house in a good school district, 2 newer cars in the driveway, maybe a country club membership, or some premium subscriptions you barely use. But underneath that surface, every dollar is already spent. Your fixed costs eat up 70 or 80% of what you bring home. When something unexpected happens, and something always happens, you either put it on a credit card or you dip into whatever small savings you've built. You're not broke, but you're not free either. You're financially stuck in what experts call a scarcity mindset. You're constantly juggling upcoming expenses, always aware of the next bill, the next payment, the next financial obligation. Path B looks less impressive from the outside. Maybe you drive a car that's a few years older, maybe your house is a little smaller than what you could technically afford. But here's what's different. You have margin. 20 or 30% of your income isn't already committed to fixed costs. When opportunities come up, whether that's an investment, a career move, or just the chance to take unpaid time off for something important, you can actually say yes. You're not constantly in survival mode. You're building. And here's what most people miss. The difference between these two paths isn't usually income, it's decisions. Specifically, the decisions you make in your 40s about your fixed costs. Let me explain why this decade is so different. When you're in your 20s or 30s, you have time on your side. You can make financial mistakes and recover from them. Save nothing until you're 32, you've still got 30+ years of compounding ahead of you. Take a career risk that doesn't work out, you've got decades to fix it. But in your 40s, the math starts to change. Not because it's too late, it's absolutely not, but because every decision has bigger consequences going forward. You still have time, but you don't have unlimited chances anymore. Consider this. The historical average annual return of the S&P 500 over the past several decades has been roughly 10%, including dividends. But that growth doesn't help you if you're not putting money in.
And here's the uncomfortable truth. According to Vanguard's research on retirement savings, the average 401k balance for Americans in their 40s is somewhere around $150,000. Now, some people have much more and some have much less. That's just the median. But what jumps out when you look at this data is how far below what most people think they'll need it actually is. Northwestern Mutual research shows Americans believe they need about $1.26 million to retire comfortably. There's a huge gap between where most people are and where they want to be. The question is, what closes that gap? It's not a hot stock tip. It's not cryptocurrency or real estate speculation. What closes that gap is something much more boring and much more powerful. It's the decisions you make about your monthly bills. Let me give you some numbers that might surprise you. The average new car payment in America right now is about $750 per month, according to Experian data. If you're financing a used car, you're looking at around $530. That's for one car. Most households have two. So let's say you're paying $1,400 a month between two car payments. Over a typical 6-year loan period, that's over $100,000 just in car payments. Now, imagine if instead of the new SUV and the sedan, you bought reliable used cars with cash, something 5 or 6 years old that you could own outright. That $700 difference per month invested in a simple index fund averaging even a conservative 7% real return after inflation would grow to over $100,000 in 10 years. That's one decision. Cars, just cars. Now let's talk about housing. According to the Census Bureau and recent Federal Reserve data, homeowners with a mortgage spend a median of about 21% of their income on housing costs. But that's the median. In expensive areas, families are spending 30%, 40%, even 50% of their income just on housing. The Department of Housing and Urban Development says anyone spending more than 30% of their income on housing is cost-burdened, and recent data shows over 50% of renter households and nearly a quarter of homeowners with mortgages fall into that category. Here's what this means in practical terms. If you locked yourself into a house at the top of what you could afford at age 38, you might be stuck paying for that decision until you're 68 or beyond. Every month, that oversized mortgage payment takes dollars that could be growing and sends them to the bank instead. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying you should never buy a nice car or live in a nice house. What I am saying is that in your 40s, these decisions start to have permanent consequences. The financial choices you make now don't just affect next month's bank balance. They ripple forward into your 50s and 60s and determine whether you enter those decades with options or with obligations. Let's talk about what's actually happening in your brain when you're under financial stress. This is where it gets really interesting. Researchers in behavioral economics, including some influential work by Sendhil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir, have documented something they call the scarcity mindset. When people feel like they don't have enough, whether it's time, money, or any other resource, their brains start to work differently. They develop what researchers call tunneling, an intense focus on immediate problems that makes it harder to think about long-term consequences. Think about it this way. When your car breaks down and you don't have an emergency fund, your brain goes into firefighting mode. All your mental energy is focused on, how do I pay for this repair right now? You're not thinking about your retirement savings. You're not thinking about career opportunities. You're just trying to survive until next Friday. But here's what's fascinating. This effect isn't just about being objectively poor. It's about the feeling of scarcity, the sense that your resources aren't enough for your needs, which means that someone earning $150,000 a year but spending $145,000 can experience the same mental narrowing as someone earning far less. The scarcity mindset doesn't just make you feel bad, it actually hurts decision-making. Research suggests that financial stress uses up mental energy, leaving fewer brain resources for thinking about other challenges and opportunities. People in this state tend to make more short-term focused decisions, sometimes borrowing too much or delaying important financial steps because they can't think beyond the immediate crisis.
And this brings me to one of the most important points about your 40s. The goal isn't just to have more money. The goal is to have enough margin that your brain can shift out of survival mode and into growth mode. When you have 3 to 6 months of expenses saved in an emergency fund,
something incredible happens. You stop flinching every time your phone buzzes. You stop lying awake doing mental math about whether you can afford to fix the furnace. That mental load, that constant low-grade stress, it lifts, and suddenly you have mental space for other things, for thinking strategically about your career, for noticing opportunities you would have been too stressed to see, for being present with your family instead of constantly worried about money. According to the Federal Reserve's latest survey on household economic well-being, only about 55% of Americans have set aside enough to cover 3 months of expenses in an emergency fund. That means nearly half of American adults are one bad month away from crisis. And here's what makes this so sad. Building an emergency fund is one of the highest return investments you can make, not in terms of interest earned, but in terms of stress reduced and opportunities captured. The psychological benefit of having 6 months of expenses sitting in a boring savings account is enormous. It changes how you walk through the world. Let me talk about what happens when you do build that cushion. When you create some margin in your life, suddenly you have what I call walk-away money. Not enough to retire, but enough that you don't have to take the first offer that comes along. Enough that you can negotiate from strength instead of desperation. Think about how this plays out in your career. Let's say your boss asks you to do something that violates your ethics, or your company starts going in a direction you don't believe in, or you get a job offer that requires moving but offers real growth potential. If you're living paycheck to paycheck with no savings, you have no leverage. You have to say yes to things you don't want and no to opportunities you do want, simply because you can't afford the financial disruption. But if you have 6 months of expenses saved, if your monthly bills are low enough that you could survive a gap in employment, everything changes. You can push back on that unreasonable demand. You can take the calculated risk on the new opportunity. You can invest in yourself. Maybe pay for a certification or attend a conference on your own dime, because you're playing offense instead of defense. This creates a positive cycle. Better financial position leads to more confidence, which leads to better career decisions, which leads to better financial position. The people who feel stuck in their careers are often the same people who feel stuck in their finances, and it's not a coincidence. One feeds the other. Now let's talk about the mistakes, the traps that people fall into that quietly destroy years of progress. Trap number 1, lifestyle creep. You get a raise, and within 6 months, your expenses have risen to match. Your lifestyle inflates to consume whatever income you have. Research from multiple financial institutions consistently shows that higher income households often have the same financial stress as middle income households because their spending goes up alongside their earning. The solution to lifestyle creep is what I call the 50% rule. Whenever you get a raise, automatically redirect at least half of it to savings or investments before you adjust your lifestyle. Let your lifestyle improve, sure, but let your savings improve faster. Trap number 2, using savings milestones as spending rewards. You hit $50,000 in your retirement account, and you celebrate by buying a boat. You build up your emergency fund, and then you use it for a vacation. I understand the impulse, I really do. You worked hard for that money. But the point of building savings isn't to have money to spend, it's to have money working for you. Every time you treat your nest egg as a piggy bank, you reset the clock on compounding. Trap number 3, housing upgrades. This is the big one. You have some equity in your current house. Rates were low for a while, so maybe you refinanced or upgraded. Now you're sitting in a house that's worth more, sure, but you're also paying a bigger mortgage payment every month for the next 30 years. According to recent analysis, the typical family would need to spend 38% of their income to cover mortgage payments on a median-priced new home. That's assuming they can even qualify. For many Americans, especially in high-cost areas, housing costs have become the single biggest barrier to building wealth. Trap number 4, car decisions. I already mentioned the average car payment of $750 for new vehicles, but let me put this in starker terms. Nearly 20% of new car buyers are now committing to monthly payments of $1,000 or more. More than 22% are taking out 84-month loans. That's 7 years just to make the numbers work. By the time you pay off a 7-year car loan, you often have little to no equity in the vehicle, and you're likely ready for another one. It becomes a treadmill that never stops. Here's what I want you to understand. These aren't moral failures, taking on a big car payment or buying more house than you need. These are normal things that normal people do. Our entire economy is designed to encourage them. But normal isn't the same as optimal. And in your 40s, when your decisions have outsized consequences for the next 2 decades of your life, it's worth asking whether you want to do what's normal or what actually serves your future self.
So, what should you do instead? Let me give you some principles, not prescriptions, because your situation is unique, and I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just someone who's thought a lot about this. First, know your number. Not your income, your savings rate. How much of your take-home pay do you actually save? Experts often say you should save about 15% for retirement, but most people save less than 5%. That gap is where money stress comes from. You don't need to reach 15% right away. Just know your number and make a plan to slowly improve it. Second, cut fixed costs before trying to earn more. This sounds strange, but it works. Money you save on monthly bills is more powerful than money you earn. Why? Because it's after tax and it lasts forever. If you cut $500 a month in expenses, that's like earning $6,000 to $7,000 more every year, and unlike a raise, you don't slowly spend it. Third, automate everything. Willpower runs out. If you depend on motivation to save, it probably won't last. But if money moves automatically into savings on payday, before you see it, you don't need discipline. Good systems beat self-control. Fourth, think about opportunity cost. Big purchases cost more than the price tag. A $45,000 car isn't just $45,000, it's also what that money could have grown into. Over 20 years, that could be more than $170,000. You can still buy nice things, just understand the real cost. Fifth, protect your margin. Margin means the gap between what you earn and what you spend. Once you have some breathing room, protect it carefully. This gap gives you choices. It helps you sleep at night. Every money decision should ask, does this protect my margin or hurt it? The big picture. Your 40s are important, but they are not too late. You still have time for change and growth. But easy fixes are harder now than in your 20s. The choices you make now matter more and last longer. Stress doesn't come from having not enough. It comes from having no buffer. When you build space between income and expenses, life feels calmer. Small changes add up. You don't need to change everything at once. Just start making choices that help your future self, not only today's self. One last question. What money decision from your past would you change if you could? What advice would you give your younger self? Your 40s aren't the end of your money story. They're the part where you decide how it ends. Make it a good one.